This is the demo for exercise 4, the window or menu window project. This is giving us an example of how, first of all, how we create menus in our programs, and secondly, how we get them, how we use the clicks on menu items to make our program do something. In this case, we have a menu bar with two menus in it. We have a file menu and a text menu. Both of these have hotkeys, as you can see by the underline. That's going to be your Alt key and a letter. Under the file menu, we simply have an exit option. Under the text menu, we have a couple of radio button menu items that allow us to select the color, as well as a visible checkbox menu item. And if I click on the visible checkbox, notice that the box becomes unchecked and my text disappears. If I click on it, my text reappears, and if you notice in the text box, it is visible. Here with the radio buttons, we can select one of these three colors to change our text to. If we click red, our text color changes to red. If we select blue, our text color changes to blue. And again, notice our radio buttons are grouped using a button group so that we can only select one color at a time. If we click on exit, the program ends. Let's take a look at the code to see what's going on. First of all, in our import statements, you see we've imported the swing library for all of our components in our window. We've imported the abstract window toolkit for our designer. I shouldn't say designer, layout manager is the word I'm looking for. And finally, the abstract window toolkit's event library for our event handling. We've decided that our class is going to extend the JFrame, so this is going to represent our window. We've created instance variables for a label for the message, a label width and height. We are able to specify the height and width of a label using the set size method, and I believe we're going to be doing that as part of our program. We have created a menu bar, a JMenu bar object called menu bar, a file menu, and a text menu, both of which are JMenu items, or JMenu objects. We've created a menu item object called exit, a radio button menu item called black item, a radio button menu item called red, and another one called blue, as well as a checkbox item called visibility, or visible item, sorry. In our constructor, we are setting the title of the window, the default close operation to exit on close. We're creating the message label and supplying it with the text that we want to display, as well as making sure that the text on the label is centered. One of the arguments that we can provide to our label constructor is the not the orientation, but the alignment of the text. We can left align, right align, or center align. We can set the preferred size of the label to a dimension object. A dimension object is an object that represents the height and width of a particular component using set preferred size. We can set the foreground color to black, so by default the label is going to be black, and we're going to add the label to the content pane. Notice that we have not set a layout manager for our window, so that it's going to be the border layout manager, and by adding it without specifying a location, we're sticking it in the center section. We have a method here called build menu bar. This method's going to create our menu bar items and add them to the window, and we'll go over that method in just a few minutes. Finally, we're going to pack the window, so we're going to arrange the window to display all of the contents in the correct size. Find the correct size to display all the contents for us. And finally, we're going to set the visibility of the window to true so it can be seen by the user. If we look at the build menu bar method that we saw called earlier, first of all, we create our menu bar using a JMenu bar class. We've got separate methods here to build the file and build the text menu. We add those menus to the menu bar, and then we call the Windows set JMenu bar method and supply it the menu bar that we just created with all of the menu items on it. If we look at create file menu, We create an exit item called set menu item, or called with a JMenu class called exit. We use the set mnemonic method to set a hotkey, if you will, and we're setting it to X. So that's going to be the Alt and the X key. And we've added an action listener because all menu items generate action events. So we've created an inner class to handle the events for the exit button called exit listener. And we're going to tie the exit item, menu item and the exit listener class together with the add action listener. We're going to create a JMenu called file and store that in file menu. We're going to set a mnemonic for that, or a hotkey of Alt F. I keep saying Control, but it's Alt. Then we add the exit item to the file menu that we've just created. In the build text menu, we are creating our menu buttons. Our radio button options. First, for the black, we're setting the mnemonic to Alt Black or Alt B using the set mnemonic. And we've created a color listener class that's going to handle the action events generated by all of our radio button menu items. We're tying that together through the add action listener. And you can see we've pretty much followed those exact same steps for both the red and the blue. The only difference is we've changed the letters that we're using for the hotkeys. For black, we're using B. For red, we're using R. And for B, we're using U, which is the third letter in blue. All of them have been set to the same listener class. They've all been tied together to the same listener class. So we're going to actually see here in just a few minutes how we are determining which radio button was selected. We have created a button group, again, to ensure that only one color can be selected at a time, and we've added all three of our radio button menu items to that group. We're also creating a checkbox for visible using the JCheckbox menu item class. We're setting its mnemonic or hotkey to Alt V. We are tying that control to a listener class called visible listener that we've created that'll handle the events from this particular control. Finally, we're creating our text menu, setting the hotkey or the mnemonic to Control Alt T. We're adding the black item, the red item, and the blue item to our text menu, followed by a separator bar, which we do through the add separator method, and then finally we're adding the visible item checkbox. As far as our inner classes go, exit listener handles the exit listener is again handling those events generated by the exit menu item. And it implements the action listener class, so of course we have to have an action performed method. What do we want to happen when we click that exit button? Well, exit button tells the computer to exit the program, so we just call system.exit. The color listener is going to be a little bit more complicated. The color listener is handling this class is handling all of the action events generated from the radio buttons that we set up to change the text color. Like I said, all menu items, including radio button and checkbox menu items, generate action listener events. So that means that we have to implement the action listener class. Now, this is different than radio buttons. Radio buttons are normally dealt with when you're doing just a J radio button in a window or on a panel. It uses a different event handler. Checkboxes use the action listener, but radio buttons use a different listener. When we're dealing with menu items, regardless of whether they're regular menu items or radio button menu items or checkbox menu items, they all use the action listener. They all generate action listener events, and so the classes that handle those events must use the action listener interface. Of course, with the action listener interface comes action performed. This method is called automatically when any one of the radio buttons are selected. So now we have to decide what we want to do. We've decided that if we click the black item, if we click the black choice in the menu, the text color will be black. If we choose the red menu item, the text color will be red, and if we choose blue, the text color will be blue. So what we've done here is we've set up a nested if statement that asks the question, is the black item's radio button, is it selected? Notice that we have very similar methods to actual radio buttons with the menu item radio buttons. So we can ask the question, is selected. It will return true if the radio button is checked. It will return false if the radio button is not checked. So I can ask the question, is black selected? If it is, we'll go ahead and set the foreground color of the label to black. If it is not, we'll move on to the next line. I will ask if the red button's been selected. If the red button has been selected, we will call the set foreground method, which changes the color of the text and the label, and we'll give it the color red. Finally, if that is false, we'll then come down and check and find out if blue has been selected. If blue has been selected, we will go ahead and change the foreground color of the label to blue. Finally, we have our inner class that deals with the visible checkbox item. Again, it has, just like all checkboxes, the checkbox menu item also generates an action listener event. Remember, pretty much all menu items are going to generate action listener action events. So we're going to use the action listener class with all menu items, but it just so happens that regular checkboxes work the same way. So our visible listener class has to implement the action listener, since we will be dealing with action events. That also means we have to have an action performed method inside this class. Again, just like regular checkboxes, we have an isSelected method that will return true if the item has been checked, or false if the item has been unchecked. Now, what do we want what do we want to happen when we click on that menu item? If visible is checked, I want to display the text in the label. If visible is not checked, I want to hide the label. So I can use the label's set visible method. Almost all components have a set visible method, including the window, that will hide or show those components depending upon what argument you pass in. In the case of message label, if I call set visible and provide true, the label is visible. If I call set visible and provide false, the label is not visible. It is invisible. Finally, of course, since we're not using a separate class here to sort of drive the program or get things rolling, I do have a main method in this class that creates a new menu window to get this whole process started off. This is pretty much the end of the exercise 4 walkthrough. We have one more walkthrough for the week 9 exercises, and then we have looked at all of them. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me, bsimbeck@ccac.edu, or you can bring your questions to class and I'll do my best to answer them. Thank you very much for watching.